This is Sonny Bunch, culture editor at The Bulwark. I am back with another episode of The Bulwark Goes to Hollywood. I am joined today by Tony Davis. Tony is an electrical engineer who moved from X-ray CAT scanners into the cinema technology business over a decade ago. His company is Tessive, where he's developed technology for movie cameras and post-production, and until last year, he headed the technology group at Real D, the company that enables 3D movie presentation in over 30,000 theaters around the world. Tony, welcome to the show. I'm glad that you could join us. I'm going to be honest. I'm probably going to be a little bit more negative about 3D than you might love. But
That's fine.
But I want to start off with something positive. I'd kind of like to divide this discussion into two discrete parts. The first is about the technology of 3D, which I find interesting. I don't think people have a good grasp on, and kind of how that technology intersects with the business of Hollywood, the business of presentation and exhibition and all that. If you can talk about that just a little bit. So, but the first thing I want to say something positive.
Okay.
That is the last 3D movie that I saw in theaters, and frankly, the last 3D movie I had seen in theaters for quite some time, was Gemini Man. I saw it in IMAX 3D, and it was in the high frame rate presentation with the big IMAX screen and all that. And I have to say it was one of the few times where I've watched a movie in 3D and thought, okay, this really adds something to the experience. It felt actually immersive. There are explosions in this movie, and the sparks feel like they're coming off the screen, but not in kind of a cheesy way, not like, My Bloody Valentine 3D, right? Like with the, knives coming right at your face or whatever. But it actually felt immersive, like you were into the movie screen and into the experience. Could you talk a little bit about what director Ang Lee was doing there to make such a to use the technology in a way that transcended the gimmickry of it?
Sure. Well, Ang Lee has a vision for what he really had a vision for what he was trying to do to expand what movies look like, what the experience is. This is something that he's been working on for a lot of years, and he's trying to bring all of the different technologies to bear in a way that actually advances his artistic vision. And he started, he's been doing this for a long time. He started with Life of Pi, which was a very beautiful 3D movie. And then when he worked on, when he made Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, which was a movie not a lot of people saw, but this was his first movie where he was pushing the frame rate boundaries and really pushing 3D into into a bigger look, into a more immersive experience, something that you can't get at home. He really wanted to differentiate the theater experience from the home experience in a way that he thought that the technology was really there for now, and that then led into Gemini Man. Again, it was, as you say, it was a high frame rate movie. It was 120 frames per second.
Could you explain to people what the difference between high frame rate and regular frame rate is?
Sure. Yeah. So for 100 years, the frame rate has been standardized at 24 frames per second, and that's ever since we've had sound sync. This is what the frame rate has been. So 24 pictures per second makes up almost everything we see in both movies and most of television, especially in North America. Almost everything we see in scripted television is 24 frames per second, and that's got a certain aesthetic now. It's actually transcended just a technology boundary, but it's actually gone into something that is part of the aesthetic of movies and the aesthetic of dramatic television. And if you see high frame rate things, your local news will be a high frame rate. It'll be 60 frames per second, or famously soap operas, have that look. It's a 60 frame per second look. It looks different. It feels different. And Ang Lee looked at this and said, no, we can go further. We can push this all the way up to 120 frames per second. So have an extremely high rate of change between frames. And so you have this fantastic clarity of imagery, and he was also pushing the actual resolution of the images. They're all 4K images. His 3D is dual camera, in camera 3D, so it's actually two cameras on set doing the 3D. That's not always the case in 3D movies. And it's just from the sheer amount of data that's being put onto the screen, it's 10, 20, 30 times more data than you normally get on a movie screen, and you feel it. It is a very different feel when you have that high data rate on screen It's highly immersive. It's pretty jarring because this is not what we normally see in movies. It's very different. It takes a moment to kind of get into this world. But when you get into it, suddenly you just feel like you're there. You're just right there, and that was what he was going for in his art on this movie.
Mm-hmm. And you're right that it feels very different. There's the famous soap opera effect, right? Which is, has there been a lot of progress forward on the high frame rate front in recent years? Because I remember I'm pretty sure the first thing I ever saw in theaters in high frame rate was the first Hobbit movie,
right?
Which they showed. So they showed critics the first Hobbit in 3D HFR, and it was, I would say, the screening did not go well.
Right.
So many critics were just like, "What is this nonsense that I'm watching?" But I do think, and I frankly felt the same way. I was kind of dreading reliving that experience while watching Gemini Man, and it was again, it was much better. It was a much better experience. And I'm curious what the difference, what's it been now, 5 years, 6 years makes?
Yeah.
In that stretch.
It really, the frame rate is using frame rates artistically, which is really what this comes down to, is what does it do to the art? What does it do to the experience you're trying to make? And the answer is it was a lot more radical than I think anybody thought. And I think the initial thought was, oh, well, we just shoot movies. We shoot them the same way we always did, but let's just crank the frame rate up. But it was a lot more difficult. When you crank the frame rate up, one of the things that happens is you just can flat out see more. And so a lot of the things on set that were pretty normal, the costumes, the lighting, everything that was always very traditional movie making, suddenly you could see the seams. I mean, you could, in The Hobbit, you could almost see the marks on the the wardrobe marks on the clothing and everything. You could see everything, and the lighting, normal cinematic lighting, which does not look very much. It does not look like real life. Suddenly that looked weird. I mean, whereas before we accepted it because it was part of this nearly 24 frames per second is a very, very low data rate. It's nearly watercolor. It's nearly animation. It's a very stylized way of thinking. We have always thought, well, this is how we represent the real world. But I think what we found is normal movies don't represent the real world that way. They distance us from the action a great deal, partly through frame rate and a lot of other things. And that distance, when it was removed, suddenly everything else that was in place, all the rest of the artifice of movie making, suddenly didn't work. And so it was bizarre. You suddenly felt like you were watching an on-set, kind of documentary, the behind-the-scenes filmmaking of the thing. It didn't feel like a movie. So Ang Lee looked at this and said, he's been very upfront about this. He's talked about, I need to rethink everything. So in Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, he just threw everything out. The actors didn't wear makeup. They didn't have cinematic lighting. They used ambient lighting. It was a very experimental movie in a lot of ways, and some of those experiments worked well in his judgment, and some didn't. He changed, so he had a practice movie basically, and then made Gemini Man, where they went back a little bit to more cinematic lighting, a little bit more of the artifice was there, and they played with, well, what does it really mean to have this kind of the art? What is the art of cinema? What am I trying to say here? What are we trying to do? And it was amazing how radical it was. He had to work a lot with the director of photography and the stereographers and everybody else on that set to come up with this new look that's a lot more palatable. But you have to get into it because it is almost a completely different language of cinema, and it's rough.
What do filmmakers and studios get wrong about 3D when they're trying to make something? Let's leave aside the pure cash grab aspect of that. We'll come back to that in a minute. But what do filmmakers and studios get wrong about 3D when they're trying to make a successful 3D movie for the audience?
Well, yeah, if they're really working at it, if this is the art that they want to make, and they're trying to make a really beautiful 3D movie, it really falls there. It's still a little bit experimental. There's lots of things you can do. I mean, for as many 3D movies as we've had, it still has been a fairly short number of years that we've been making large-scale 3D movies. And a lot of times people will, when they're making it, the biggest problem is that you don't you don't treat the 3D seriously, or don't choose an aesthetic and that you carry on throughout, and so you don't take the audience into the 3D. You need to make sure that as you're going from scene to scene, and as you're setting up your scenes, and as you're setting up things on set, and blocking and everything that you're doing, that you're remembering you're making a 3D movie, and that you need to take the audience with you. So a lot of the normal 2D things, you don't usually have. Although you can, and it's been done, but you don't usually have these giant face-filling shots, with a face just hanging there in space. That's kind of weird. You usually want to have people a little bit further back. And also, if you're making a 3D movie, you really do have to think in that third dimension. You have to think, do I want the foreground to be extending nicely kind of from the bottom of the proscenium, bottom of the frame, and extending out into the distance, because that would draw the audience's view into this, where normally in a 2D image you'd be framing things with kind of foreground, branches of trees or things like this that would just frame things nicely in 2D, where you really might want to have something that draws you in a lot more. That way of thinking requires people who've really thought about it for a long time. So people who have spent their whole careers making 2D movies, when they want to make a 3D movie, it takes some relearning of the craft to do it well.
Mm-hmm. Is there one of the things, again? So as a critic, they would always, for a long time, for I would say, I don't know, between 2009 or 2010 and 2000. I want to say 13 or 14 or so, we would almost always go to the 3D screenings.
Right.
They would want us to do that. And then the studios, I think, realized how resistant we are as a class and a cast to this whole thing. So they stopped that.
Right.
But I've seen probably more 3D movies than the average person, and this was before I had kids. And the thing that always jumped out at me most was that the animators got it better than the live action.
Right.
Teams. The animators always seem to understand that, or they seem more comfortable working with a depth of vision into the screen as opposed to coming out of the screen.
Right.
Is that something that you have picked up on in your work with artists, or is it just kind of still hit and miss?
Well, it's I've seen that. Certainly, that's exactly as you say. That if people working in animation, they're already thinking about the depth of the scene that they're making. They understand how this works, and they also have a lot of flexibility to move things around, kind of in real time, and get things exactly the way they want it. There are some technical aspects to making 3D movies that are still challenging. It's if you film with two cameras, you've kind of locked in what you have for depth. If you do post-conversion, you have all the post-conversion issues. Post-conversion can go very well, but it also can be challenging, and you lose a lot of depth information that you would have had with two cameras. In animation, you have everything. You've got total control to place things where you want them, to move them if you need to, and to visualize them essentially in real time exactly how you'd like things to look. And so animation has had a longer experience with 3D visualization anyway, because even in the late 90s, computer animators were visualizing things with stereoscopic displays and things like this, and crazy glasses. So there's kind of a long history of 3D and what looks good in that world, where the direct live action people, they didn't have that level of work. And then there is, even in the live action world, there are kind of two artistic camps that are a little bit in tension. They both have their own aesthetic. Both I love. I mean, I actually like both aesthetic. Roughly speaking, it's the James Cameron aesthetic and what we might call the Ang Lee aesthetic, although that's been used by Martin Scorsese and other people. So it's the James Cameron has his group put down several rules for 3D movies that started with Avatar, and it was everything must be inside the screen, nothing coming out. Everything's very naturalistic. It's very real, and so it's very easy to watch. But it also doesn't have a lot of just super depth to it. So the 3D is sort of mild in a certain sense, but it's also very easy to watch, and it's very easy to go from scene to scene, and so you can feel very comfortable watching that. If you remember in 2011 Hugo, Martin Scorsese's movie, that was one of the first really deep 3D movies. I mean, this is one where the depth of 3D was pushed well beyond reality. It was actually things were extending out into the audience. It wasn't poking you in the eye with spears and things, but it was definitely deep. and it was pushing beyond even physical reality a little bit, because when you do some of that, you get a little bit more. But he was using it. I mean, that's a fantasy world anyway. I mean, it's fantasy Paris, so it's a really, and I've seen that movie again recently. That movie holds up. It's one of the most impressive 3D movies ever made. Ang Lee used the same 3D team, so the same stereographers. We're working on Life of Pi, and then Gemini Man and Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk. That group has a very different aesthetic that I also like. But it's interesting because you start to see that there are styles to 3D in a way that we have styles to cinematography and styles to everything else, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah. So, as I said, I'm not the hugest fan of 3D in the world. What are the things that can go wrong with 3D?
Okay, so I had, as every person in a business ought to have, I had a marker board in my office with all the reasons people hate 3D. Right. So, I mean, if you're gonna make 3D systems, you'd better understand that some people just hate it, and they hate it. And we've talked about the content itself, and that's one side of things, and it's a side that as a technologist we didn't really control. We would talk to people and we would give suggestions, but for the most part, that's what the artists do, and it's our job. Just like, if you make a violin for artists, I don't control the art. I can make you a really good instrument.
Sure.
But on the exhibition side, there are issues. And if I looked at those issues, and so roughly speaking, just to talk about people who hate 3D, there's a lot. You are in good company. There are by our best numbers, and these are old now, so I don't know what they are now, but roughly speaking, there are 20% of the movie going population who always seek out a 3D movie. They love 3D, and they will always, if there's a 2D or 3D movie, they will always go to the 3D movie. Mm-hmm. There's about 30% of the population who hate 3D movies, and they will never see a 3D movie even if you paid them. So they will avoid it completely. The rest of the audience can be persuaded if they're given a good marketing pitch of why the movie would be really good in 3D, or if their friends like to go see a 3D movie, they will go do that. So that's the list. So what's driving people away? And I don't have numbers on this, but my guess is that it's not getting better right now, right? So the number of people who hate 3D has been going up over the years, and the biggest problems are, what people would say is the movie was dim, the glasses were uncomfortable, I got a headache, or I felt sick after watching the movie. I just don't like paying the money. That's one of them I can't do much about. But there are issues of, just simple brightness issues. 3D does suck up some of the light, even with a very, very good system. RealD has great systems for preserving as much light as we can out of the projector, and they did a really good job on this. But you're going to lose light. It's going to be dimmer, and so you're going to need these digital projectors to run pretty hard to get up to the required light level on the screen. And there are standards for how bright it's supposed to be on the screen. As the digital projectors have been aging, though, digital projectors have been out for quite a long time. They're an expensive piece of capital equipment. They're aging, and their ability to produce the amount of light you need is going down. That's really uncomfortable. If you're watching a 3D movie and it's dim, that hurts. You don't see the nice colors, you don't see a thing, and it will cause eye strain and fatigue, and you'll be annoyed. The glasses, there's been an enormous amount of engineering into the glasses designs to try to make them comfortable. When you're making 2 billion of those things, it's quite the engineering design of those glasses a lot more than you'd think it would be. But but people don't like wearing them over their own glasses. They have problems with people who's like, I wear glasses already, and I got to stick these things over them, and they kind of reflect, and they don't work right.
I'm not wearing my glasses right now, but I actually do usually wear glasses,
right?
And it is. Look, it hurts. It actually causes physical discomfort.
Yeah, I agree. That was one of the things that had been an ongoing project. People don't know, but there are actually Clipon 3D glasses out there, and that are made available, but they're not advertised very well, and people don't know about them. And they, whenever I would hand them to people in our screening rooms, so I'd bring people in, they were always thrilled. It's like, I never even knew these existed. This is fantastic, and they fit really well. And it was, there's a whole series of things like that. And one of the problems is, just like a restaurant, if you have a bad experience, you're never going back. So if one if for some either artistic or technical reason you have a bad experience in a 3D movie, it's very easy to say I don't really want to ever do that again because I'm only going to watch this movie once and I want to have a really good experience watching it. And if I have a bad experience, it's not I'm going to go back and give it a second chance in 2D. I'm done. I watched the movie. For most people, they don't watch movies 5 or 6 times. So
Sure.
it's really important that the quality on every single screening be excellent, and that's difficult.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding from projectionist friends, the few projectionists who still exist,
the dying breed,
is that the another problem is that the 3D projectors, essentially, theaters are using the same projectors to do both 3D and 2D movies, and then a lot of the times they don't take the 3D filter off for the 2D movies.
That happens.
Which is not, this is not a you problem. This is like an AMC problem and a Regal problem.
Right.
But
so the relationship between people like, so the industry on the back end is kind of interesting. The relationship between people like Realty or IMAX or Dolby is all very different. Realty is so those 3D systems are all owned by Realty. They're actually essentially leased into the theater. It is recommended strongly that they be pulled out for 2D showings, and they should be. For a lot of reasons, they should be pulled out. And there's usually a motorized drive that will pull them out and get them out of the way. But that doesn't always happen. One of the things that happened is, so when Avatar came, so the really brief history is, first modern 3D movie was 2005. It was Chicken Little. The first big 3D movie everybody knows is Avatar in 2009. And when Avatar came out, it was right after the big, contractual deals had gone together between the studios and the exhibitors to put in digital projection, and 3D was part of the contractual deal. So that was when the big push to put 3D systems all across the country and all around the world happened. And at that time, there was an enormous amount of training that went into place to get the exhibitors trained up and everything working, and to make sure every single theater was working exactly right, because there was all this attention on it. So there's this huge amount of attention to get the 3D working. Well, it's been 11 years, and a lot of that training has gone. I mean, people go to different jobs and they do different things. It was sort of considered the sort of thing that just works, and you don't have to look at it all the time and redo this. So, and the business has been undergoing difficulties, and so the attention to detail that is absolutely essential for public exhibition of movies. I mean, it's important that, just keeping the projectors in focus is a thing you have to do, and you've always had to do. And then you add a 3D system on top of that, which has its own alignment issues and positioning issues and all kinds of other things that you have to do.
Right.
And, I mean, not least of which is cleaning the thing. One of the things that we found just going into systems and checking things out was just dust and popcorn grease, which is a real thing. Popcorn grease.
Really?
Oh my gosh.
Just gets everywhere?
It gets everywhere. It goes through the whole place. It gets all on the screens. It gets on the optics. So you have high precision optics here. These are NASA grade optics that we're putting into stuff for 4K transmission. And we got popcorn grease all over it. It's essentially impossible to clean off a first surface mirror. So, so you have systems that need attention, that degrade, and when you have a business that's undergoing the problems that exhibition was undergoing even before COVID, doing that sort of regular maintenance was very difficult. And in the big theaters that people would go see, that would happen. But in Auditorium 16 down the hall, that was not happening, is what we found. And different theater chains would approach this different ways. But they really were doing their best. But it's a tough thing. It's a very difficult thing to keep consistent on 30,000 screens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean there's a lot of moving parts there, and especially since they're like I said, the projectionist is a dying is a dying breed. I remember once, just brief digression here, not related to 3D at all, but I was in an AMC Dolby theater, one of their Dolby setups.
Nice.
And the movie starts playing, or first the previews start playing, and I noticed that the ratings boxes at the bottom were cut off at the bottom.
Oh,
and I was like something. I can already tell something is wrong here. And then the movie started and it had some subtitles. It was actually Ghost in the Shell. This is this.
Oh, nice.
So it's a movie I like, but the first time I saw it, the subtitles, they have these subtitles for the characters who are speaking other languages, and they were cut off on the bottom, and I just ran out of the theater. I was like, you have it in the wrong aspect ratio.
Right.
You need to get it into the, and the guy like went and he's like, oh sure, whatever.
What's your
and like
point?
went and he's and they fixed it. Thank God they fixed it. I came out and the guy was like, you were right. How could you tell? I was like, because the picture was wrong.
That's
How
right.
could you not tell?
How could you not tell? That's right there.
You work here in this theater. How could you not? Like, I know. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, but like, it's a real problem. Even in the nice theaters, even in like, again, this was the AMC Dolby, with the Dolby experience.
Yes.
And they just had it in the wrong aspect ratio, and it drives me bananas.
It drives me absolutely crazy, and I do the same thing. I I never pull out my business card when I do that. I always very secretly say, I'm just a normal patron who thinks that maybe you should put this in focus. And I have these very stern conversations with the poor kid who's trying to run the things.
Right.
And I also know that in most theater chains, so Dolby will be a little different, but most theater chains, there is nobody on premises who can do anything about that. They might be able to adjust focus, but your normal theater these days, the normal multiplex, is essentially a giant robot that's run from another city, and the only thing that's run locally is the concession stand. The marquee, the projectors, the lights, the door locks, everything is computer controlled from Plano, Texas, or something like this, and so they have. I mean, the doors are literally locked. They can't even get up, except for a couple of managers might be able to get up there, but they can't even go up there to do anything about those systems up there. And so you'll have what are essentially programming errors going on in this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that the theater chains are unaware of. They really have been trying to put in systems to maintain quality. And some groups do it. One of the things I thought was really cool is IMAX actually has a system that starts up every single morning. It's got cameras and microphones and stuff that remotely check their systems out. So every morning those systems go through this full automated check for like 45 minutes, running test clips, test DCPs, and things like this, so that the Canadians are always assured that everything's fine. So.
No, that's that. So I actually interviewed an IMAX executive last year or the year before for a Washington Post piece, and I was blown away by this. That they have this whole kind of remote system in place to make sure that every theater in the country that has an IMAX projector in it, even the like kind of rinky-dink, the multiplex IMAX, the fake IMAX, they like make sure that the bulb is bright enough and the screen is clean and all that stuff. I was very impressed.
They're
to learn that.
They're very good at this. There are other groups, some of the theater chains have started to put that sort of technology in, because they know that this is an ongoing problem. But it's been a little bit slower to have widespread use of those sorts of technologies. But I mean, look, if you're not going to have a projectionist sitting there doing your quality, you'd better have something. And I think that there was this gap that happened in the industry where we did have trained people who cared about movies, who were really in there checking the bulbs and checking the optics and things like this, and then for a lot of reasons those people just weren't there on a regular basis. They still exist, but they cover multiple multiplexes and things like. Usually they'll travel around a region, and that just left a lot of problems for people. And so the big competition now, if the window's going away, then oh my goodness, we might actually have to compete on actual quality between a theater and your home theater. And that's something kind of scary because, my home theater beats a movie theater by a lot of metrics. I mean, by brightness, color gamut matches, sound levels match. I mean, there's a lot of things. And movie theaters are now looking at if we don't have exclusivity, on a movie, if you can watch a movie at your home and in a movie theater at the same time, how do you convince people, I need to go to a movie theater? I need to go to that movie theater and experience that. And so they're looking, now, and they've been looking for a while, but the economics of it just didn't work quite right because they had exclusivity. I mean, when there's exclusivity, even the best intentions a little bit get diluted to that. So I think it could be, I'm a little excited about what might happen.
Well, this brings us to kind of the second part of the conversation, which is the business side of things, because I mean, this is a very tenuous time in the exhibition world for all sorts of reasons. I mean, I'm fond of the thought that COVID has basically sped everything up by 10 years.
Yeah.
All sorts of changes. And I think that's especially true in theatrical, right? So, as it is, 3D is already losing market share to 2D. I mean, this is true year over year.
Yes.
And people are going to be going to the theaters less, I think, probably for the foreseeable future anyway. Even after everything, God only knows when everything's going to open again.
Oh, please soon.
Yeah, God, I need to get back to a theater.
I'm losing my mind.
but I mean, it's a real pickle, especially for, again, 3D, which is a tough technology for people. So, I mean, what are and one thing I'm actually really curious about. You mentioned that the projectors are getting old,
Yes.
essentially,
Yes.
and they are in need of replacing in some cases, or fine tuning or whatever. I mean, what is the actual solution here look like? Does it look like the studios again going to the theaters and saying, "Hey, we're gonna chip in a certain amount of money"? Is it is it the 3D companies? Is it IMAX? I mean, like, what's the actual? How do we get better projectors into the theaters so you can have that experience again?
Well, I say, so I just send fan mail to Jeff Bezos all the time. But anyway, so I don't
Amazon movie company,
Amazon
the new
movie
AMC.
Company. Yeah, I don't know. So. It's a distressed industry, and the different chains have different financial structures, which I don't get into because finances are so boring, and I'm a technology guy. But that's going to be what drives it, right? So the projectors, many of which were paid through this kind of crazy financial scheme that was put together at the start of digital cinema. At the start of digital cinema, there was this transfer payment system made from the studios to the exhibitors, basically, but not directly to the exhibitors. The studios were essentially financing the projectors with these virtual print fees that they were doing, and a lot of and that has that period is over. There are no more new virtual print fees coming along, which means that the projectors now are just these chains just have to pony up the capital money. And we're talking just for rough numbers, a projector in an auditorium can be anywhere from $40,000 to $200,000. So these are very expensive pieces of equipment. They're also just flat out not lasting as long as people were hoping.
What is causing that? I mean, is it the popcorn grease? Is it
It's partly that. Partly it was just a very new technology, and a lot of the optics in them and the light switches and things like this just didn't have the longevity that they had estimated on these things. But it is partly maintenance. There have been maintenance issues. There's actually this steps in an enormous debate / yelling, screaming argument about what in the world's going on with the projectors. But the truth is that the projectors are. There was some surveys of the actual light output of projectors done in the past couple of years, and it was actually pretty shocking to everybody how the projectors were performing. And there's a whole classes of projectors that just aren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, even with light engine replacements and things like this in them. And you just can't get some parts for some of these older projectors. So that's been a whole thing. And the different theater chains had been looking at major capital equipment purchases to actually replace large swaths of their projectors, but they were all looking at huge amounts of money to do that. Mm-hmm. And also at the same time looking at, are these also going to just last 10 years? And we expected 20. Right. If they last half as long as we were hoping, what in the world are we going to do? So so a few things just hit all at once. There was the kind of the projector problem that was coming along. There was the fact that just movie viewing in general was declining. 3D declining is an issue for everybody. Even for all, we've talked about all the reasons people may not like that, but it's a financial issue too. 3D is one of the, in a certain sense, the 3D revolution was one of the financial things that got us over the top so that we could do digital cinema, because it's one of the only places besides popcorn. It's one of the only places that a local theater makes money. So that $3 upcharge you get for a 3D movie is substantially going to the local theater itself, and it's a big deal for them.
Sure.
So it's all of these things hit at once, and then COVID came, and everybody's just so numb. Like, what do we even do? And so all of these interesting ideas are starting to kind of come off the shelf and be dusted off and say, well, maybe we could do some of these things we didn't think we needed to do before. So,
like what?
Well, there's crazy ideas floating around. One is that there had been a bit of the industry, obviously not the 3D providers, but the industry generally had sort of given up on 3D and said, well, people don't like it, so maybe we won't do anything with that. But then there was a little bit of a resurgence. I mean, Gemini Man did good 3D business, and Alita Battle Angel did good 3D business.
Mm-hmm.
So movies that actually were designed and marketed for 3D seem to actually do pretty well. So the idea is, well, maybe we don't do a scattershot approach to 3D. Maybe we just really do it for the movies that need it, and we also concentrate on how many theaters really need to be able to do 3D exhibition, and we increase the quality on those theaters, really go clean them up, put
Right.
really good equipment in, really fantastic bulbs, make those things work. But the other idea was, there's for a lot of years there was this big push to premium large format theaters. That's the IMAXs, Dolby's, Regal, RPX, the really big 70-foot screens and giant projectors or multiple giant projectors, and hundreds and hundreds of seats in a huge auditorium, which is great. But the problem is it doesn't scale the way you'd think. It actually gets very expensive to outfit a theater that way. And one of the things that had been rattling around was kind of this crazy idea of a premium small format theater. Take Auditorium 16 down the hall, so if you're me and big movie comes out you want to see, but I've got things to do. There's a lawn to mow and stuff to do and family to see. So I missed the opening weekend. And I'm like, okay, I'll get it next weekend or the third weekend. If I see it third weekend, I'm in Auditorium 16, and I'm going to have an experience that is demonstrably inferior to what I would have had at home, and I will not go third week. And so these movies don't have very long legs anymore because people who are discerning don't go down there to even mess with that. And if there's no window, you won't go at all because there's no reason. Because the only last reason was because it was soon. Well, it's not actually that expensive to turn Auditorium 16 into something really phenomenal, because the screen is only 30 feet wide. You can light that up with a projector that costs a quarter what the big projector costs, and maybe an eighth. You can put object sound that's Dolby Atmos or something similar in there.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a really fantastic architecture in that room that's very inviting. You have these fabulous seats, and so make it a 50-person seated auditorium. And the economics for that didn't really work too well before because people would see it in Auditorium 16 because they had to. Maybe that looks better. I mean, maybe that starts to look like something you could do and would actually work well, and might be coupled with some other interesting ideas related to memberships. And people have their kind of movie memberships and things like this, and say you're guaranteed a seat, and we're going to have this movie for 8 weeks, like you used to be able to see it.
Yeah.
There's
that's an interesting idea. I like it. I didn't realize that you could get a projector for that much cheaper for that size auditorium.
It scales really well, and the projector you get for cheaper can be really amazing. So if people buy new projectors now, there are laser projectors and laser phosphor projectors. So a true RGB laser projector, which is something that's really being pushed a lot now, and there are fairly inexpensive. Now that's new. Our RGB laser. So this is using actual lasers for illumination. So it's not a xenon bulb like projectors used to use. It's actual lasers coming out of the front of that snout of the projector and lighting up on the screen. And you get these amazing colors using that sort of an illumination source. It's still a DLP projector, digital light, the TI processor. But the colors you get are just astonishing. The contrast you get is astonishing. You can have something on screen that comes, that really pushes what you get on OLEDs at home. You can Dolby's been doing this on the Dolby Vision projectors, of course, are just astonishing. The black levels they make are great. Well, we're now seeing inexpensive projectors that can come close to those levels of quality that you get on $1 million Dolby projector. You can get that for $50,000, and there are different screen technologies as well. So the screens themselves don't have to have the crazy hotspot in them. You can have a beautiful, smooth, flat screen, and there's aspect ratio questions. You could actually make a really nice wide, so what they call a scope screen, cinemascope screen, super wide, in a 30-foot auditorium. Sit close to it. You're in your far field of focus, which means that from where you're sitting, you can't really tell if it's 100 feet from you or 50 feet from you because it's far enough away that you can't do that. It's very different from sitting. What you'd have to do in your theater at home is sit 3 feet from your screen, and I have to wear my reading glasses if I do that, and that's not okay. So you can make something that's really impressive, but because you don't have to put as much light out, the cost scaling goes really well, and the lifetime of those projectors is projected to be quite good because the laser light sources run really well.
Interesting. Do you think and this is possibly beyond the scope. We may have to cut this. I
Ah,
don't know. Do you think that James Cameron's never-ending Avatar series will be enough to save 3D as a viable commercial system for the foreseeable future?
well, it's really hard to say. There's
If we ever see it, who
if
knows?
it ever
You know,
comes out. I mean, that has been the great hope for a lot of companies right now, is that James Cameron will come in and save us all. And it's the thing is, nobody ever bets against James Cameron. I mean, you just should not do that. He has every time has been able to put things together. He's put things together that are just amazing. And Avatar was an amazing movie. People don't really remember the plot of Avatar very much, but they do remember the experience. I mean, I went in there and
sure.
it was something really new and really different. Whether you can capture that new and different feel from just a technology standpoint at this point is kind of up for grabs. But would I bet against him? I would not. At this point, it's going to be a little while before we see it. He's always been, in his group is always very serious about image quality. Of course, we had a bit of a run with this with Alita Battle Angel, which was Robert Rodriguez director, but this was under the James Cameron Productions, and there was from Fox a very strong push to get the 3D quality up at that point, and it was a huge push. I mean, we had different groups on the phone and on email and everything with basically every theater in the country. So for that one, it was particularly a North America push, and it was, let's get the quality back up. Let's get back to Avatar levels. Let's really make this go. And it actually did clean things up quite a bit. It was a huge improvement to systems. I mean, it found all kinds of just little things to fix, just clean the things and make it better. When you have that kind of person behind things, it does actually help. When the director is in favor of it, and if that director is James Cameron, things move. It's as I was told, it is James Cameron's world, and we just live in it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned producing fewer of these 3D movies and doing them really well. So, maybe less of the post-conversion stuff and more, two camera or whatever. I mean, whatever it takes,
right?
But is 3D still viable at that point if you're only making, say, 5 really good 3D movies a year, or
That's
7 or 8?
It's the big question, right? So is it still viable at that level? And possibly. One of the things that it will really depend on what happens to the industry. So right now, everything's constrained by by the financial structure of how, what the ticket prices are and what the split of those tickets is, and where the 3D money goes, and who's paying for the glasses, and on and on and on.
Right.
And so it's very complicated, and it was very complicated to put that structure in place in the first place. But it seems to me personally that structure is going to have to be revisited, and look, if the window is being revisited, that I don't see why the financial structure isn't going to be looked at as well. So if that's the case, is every movie you go to, is it the same price? I mean, should ticket prices be exactly the same for each movie that you see? Should a 3D movie not, instead of a $3 upcharge, maybe it's more, but you're really promised it's going to be worth it. I mean, you're going to like this. You're going to have fun. If you don't like it and you're not having fun, why in the world are you at the movies? We need to make sure this is just really exciting and fun for people. So I think it's going to have to be a business model question more than is the technology's all there. There is technology to make. Just give a couple of numbers. Standard 3D movie is so we're very old-fashioned industry. We use foot Lamberts for our brightness levels. Standard 3D movie is supposed to be at 4 foot Lamberts. A normal 2D movie is supposed to be at no more than 14 foot Lamberts, and there's reasons why there's a do not exceed number on that. Most good theater chains, especially in the PLFs, the premium large format theaters, will be showing your 3D movie at 8 to 10 foot Lamberts, a really nice, bright 3D movie. A bad projector, and we've seen more than one of these, will be running at 1 foot Lambert in 3D, which is unwatchable. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So if you really start pushing brightness, if you have just a few 3D movies and you have something that is a 14 foot Lambert 3D movie, so it's the same brightness as a 2D movie, and and you have the equipment to do that, and you're really paying $5 or more upcharge for that experience, there is a business for that. I mean, that can be made to work, but it's a question of whether or not all of the players in this can actually make that happen.
Yeah. Well, that is pretty much everything I wanted to know about 3D. This is great. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to plug? Do you want to throw a hey, come check out my stuff?
Oh yeah, well, you can always anybody who would like to contact me can always email me at tony@tessive.com. That's TESSIVE.com. If you have any questions about things, the other things I would plug is anybody who has a 3D television at home should check out a couple of 3D Blu-rays, and here are my recommendations for both people who still have a 3D television at home. They are Dial M for Murder, the 1954 Alfred Hitchcock movie. That movie was shot in native 3D, and it was presented with polarized 3D, not anaglyph, not the red-blue glasses. And there's a restoration on Blu-ray that you can go buy. Amazon has it, and it's just astonishing to see what Alfred Hitchcock would do with 3D in 1954. The other movie that you have to find, and it's tricky, and I had to get it but Amazon had it, it just shipped from China, is a crazy movie that's called The Young and Prodigious T.S. Spivet. It got sent straight to Netflix, so it never got a 3D release, but it is one of the most beautiful 3D movies you will ever see, and it's kind of hilarious, and it has Helena Bonham Carter in it, and it's pretty wild, and it's just gorgeous. So if you want to see how 3D can be a beautiful cinematic experience, something that's really transportive, those are a couple of movies I recommend.
Excellent. Tony, thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back next week with another installment of The Bulwark Goes to Hollywood.